Have you ever thought about those powerful stories from way back, the ones from ancient history that maybe without us even realizing it are still shaping things today?
Yeah, the ones that seem sort of hidden sometimes.
Exactly. Stories filled with, big promises, but also conflict and maybe even a chance for things to turn around, redemption,
Yeah.
often featuring figures who kind of fade into the background.
Uh-huh.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into one of those. The story of Ishmael and his descendants. People sometimes call them the forgotten tribes.
Right, and our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is really to pull out the key insights, the surprising bits of knowledge from our source material. We're working from excerpts from Ishmael's enduring legacy, the forgotten tribes of the Middle East.
Okay.
We want to see how Ishmael's line, well, how it really shaped the history, the culture, even the spiritual landscape of the Middle East for, like, millennia, and connect those old stories to the world we see now.
Okay, so let's unpack this. And it starts, maybe surprisingly, not with kings or anything, but with Hagar. She was an Egyptian slave in Abraham and Sarah's household.
Right, not exactly where you'd expect a major historical line to begin.
No. And after years waiting for a child, our source explains Sarah feeling, desperate. She kind of took matters into her own hands.
The surrogacy thing.
Yeah, she gave Hagar to Abraham.
Yeah.
Now, the source notes, okay, this practice, it happened back then, common in some cultures,
Yeah.
but it stresses this wasn't God's original plan for them. That was about divine promise, not, well, human workarounds.
And Hagar's pregnancy, it definitely changed things for her, but it also stirred up a lot of jealousy from Sarah, led to mistreatment.
Which caused Hagar to run away, right, into the wilderness.
Exactly. And this is where you get a key takeaway, I think, how God steps in even when things seem, desperate and messy because of human choices.
Well, what happened out there?
In the wilderness, by a spring, an angel of the Lord actually appears to Hagar. And this is, well, pretty unique. The messenger calls her by name, offers her recognition, comfort,
Wow.
and then delivers this really powerful prophecy about her son, Ishmael. His name even means God hears, acknowledging her misery.
What was the prophecy exactly?
It described Ishmael as a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers.
A wild donkey of a man.
Ah,
That's quite the image.
it is. And the source really highlights the double-edged nature here. On one hand, a promise of a huge lineage, greatly multiplied. But on the other, clearly marked by conflict, by restlessness. It sets a tone, doesn't it?
It really does. It's amazing, though, how God's faithfulness comes through even in these really hard moments. The source emphasizes that.
Yeah.
Then the story shifts again years later. Isaac is born. He's the child of promise for Abraham and Sarah.
And the household tension just snaps.
Right. Sarah, predictably maybe, she freaks out about Isaac's inheritance, demands Hagar and Ishmael be sent away.
Our source paints that as a really tough moment for Abraham. Heavy heart, it says. But he did it.
But God steps in again.
Yeah, God reassures
good.
Abraham, tells him Ishmael also would become a great nation. It wasn't just about Isaac.
So Hagar and Ishmael are out in the wilderness again?
Yes, and this is where God's continued faithfulness, his involvement, really shines. Their water runs out. Hagar is in despair. But God hears Ishmael's cry.
He hears him.
He hears him, opens Hagar's eyes. She sees a well, saves their lives, reaffirms that promise.
Incredible.
So Ishmael grows up there in the desert, becomes an archer, marries an Egyptian woman, and this is key. He fathers 12 sons.
Their sons.
The source calls them 12 princes, and that number 12, it directly mirrors the 12 tribes of Israel, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. So,
Yeah.
okay, from this really difficult start, Ishmael's line grows. But then it gets, well, really interesting when we look at these 12 sons. Our source talks about their huge impact across the ancient world. It lists their names from Genesis 25. Nebaioth, Kiar, Edbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedema.
That's quite a list.
It is. And these 12, they became tribal rulers. They're tents and flocks dotting the wilderness from Egypt to Assyria. Think about that. The sheer scale of their influence across this huge area.
Yeah.
They were definitely a major force.
And a key takeaway here is how some of these tribes really carved out specific identities. Nebaioth and Kedar, for instance, renowned for their flocks, their black tents. Their names pop up in old inscriptions, even in biblical prophecies.
Okay.
Duma and Tema, they settled more in the Arabian deserts, known for trading caravans, while others like Massa, Hadad, Jetur, They built reputations as traders, yes, but also warriors.
So these tribes really are the roots.
They undeniably became the patriarchs of the Arab peoples, yeah, stretching their influence right across the Arabian Peninsula and even further.
Now, the source mentions the relationship between Ishmael's descendants and Israel was, well, complex.
Uh-huh. Neighbors and rivals is how it puts it.
Right. Sometimes trading, sometimes raiding, often
Mhm.
clashing. What was the impact of that dynamic?
Well, looking bigger picture, the source highlights that these interactions, they weren't just fulfilling that old prophecy, they were forging these really deep identities, these rivalries that would, shake things in the region for thousands of years.
Wow.
That phrase, his hand will be against everyone. It wasn't just some family squabble, it was really the start of an age-old struggle, echoing through empires, religions, nations. This isn't just history locked in the past. It's like the bedrock of some long-standing tensions and connections, too.
Let's dig into some of those specific encounters then, between Ishmael's line and Israel. Surprisingly, the source points out Ishmaelite traders actually played this indirect, almost accidental role in God's bigger plan.
How so?
They were the ones who transported Joseph down to Egypt,
Well,
completely unintentionally setting the stage for Israel's survival during the famine later on.
that's fascinating, but that wasn't the whole story, obviously. The relationship soured.
Right? It definitely developed into something more adversarial. You have the Midianites and Amalekites now. These are descendants of Abraham through Keturah, but also linked to Ishmael and Esau's lines.
Right, complex family tree there.
Yeah. And they repeatedly raided Israel's crops. The source says they left the land impoverished. These weren't just minor skirmishes. They were like full-scale incursions, left deep scars.
So these family feuds really escalated.
Absolutely. Turned into bitter wars. The Amalekites, even though they came from Esau, often allied with Ishmael's tribes, they attacked Israel at a place called Rephidim, and this sparked what the source calls God's eternal enmity against Amalek.
Eternal enmity, that's strong language.
It signifies something really profound, a lasting conflict, not temporary. And later, during the time of the Judges, you see these coalitions of Eastern peoples, Midianites, Amalekites, others, constantly harassing Israel.
So beyond just fighting, what was their role? Were they always antagonists?
Not always directly fighting, no. Even in peacetime, Ishmael's descendants were kind of always there in Israel's story. Why? Because they were the nomadic traders. They controlled the crucial spice routes, the caravan trails. Big economic influence.
Ah, okay. So deeply intertwined, even economically.
Exactly. And it's also significant that the prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah, they spoke about these tribes. Both warnings, but also, interestingly, hope.
Okay, that is an interesting shift. From conflict, maybe towards peace. What did the prophets actually see for Ishmael's descendants? Were there specific warnings or hints of hope?
Well, centuries after the initial events, Isaiah delivers this pretty striking message about these Arabian tribes.
Okay.
Our source describes it vividly. He paints this picture. Their busy trade routes, turned into paths for desperate refugees, their mighty warriors, brought low by divine judgment. He talks about caravans fleeing, from drawn swords, the heat of battle.
So a message of judgment first.
Yes. And Jeremiah, too, he prophesied against Kedar and the kingdoms of Hazor, predicted desolation. Kedar, which was famous for its archery, its wealth, even they couldn't withstand this judgment, according to Jeremiah.
Heavy stuff.
But then, like you said, it wasn't only doom. There's this surprising turn.
What's the turn?
Well, what really stands out is another passage from Isaiah. It speaks of a future time, a time when these very tribes of Ishmael would actually bring their wealth, their worship.
Worship to God.
Yes. It imagines herds of camels covering the land, people from Sheba bringing gold, incense proclaiming praise. It even mentions the rams of Nebaioth, one of Ishmael's sons, remember, serving as accepted offerings on God's altar.
Wow, that's a complete reversal.
It is. Here, Ishmael's sons aren't enemies. They're pictured as worshipers. It's like this profound invitation to redemption, to unity.
That's really something. So how does all this ancient stuff, these prophecies, these stories, how does it connect later on? In the New Testament, maybe? And even, today?
Good question. Our source explains the Apostle Paul actually uses Ishmael and Isaac symbolically in Galatians.
Okay, how does he use them?
He presents Hagar, the slave woman,
Yeah.
as representing sort of an older way, trying to earn God's favor through human effort, following rules sometimes called the covenant of law.
Right.
Then Sarah, the free woman, represents a new way, the covenant of grace, where God's promises are fulfilled through his favor, his gift, not earned.
So it's a metaphor.
Exactly. The source is clear. Paul's using it as a spiritual metaphor. It's not like a condemnation of Ishmael's actual descendants or their lineage.
That's an important distinction. And what about Ishmael's place outside the Bible?
Ah, yes. That's also really significant. Our source mentions many Arab genealogies trace their roots right back to Ishmael, especially through Nebaioth and Kedar.
Okay.
And in Islamic tradition, Ishmael is highly honored, seen as a prophet, the forefather of the Arab nation, revered for his faithfulness alongside Abraham.
So this connection, it really underlines a deep truth, doesn't it? Abraham's descendants, through both Isaac and Ishmael, have just profoundly shaped world history. Their fates are tangled together.
Absolutely. Visible sometimes, hidden other times, but intertwined. So, okay, bringing it forward, what does this all mean for us, like, today?
Well, our source connects the dots. It suggests Ishmael's descendants are widely believed to be among the Arab peoples living across the Middle East and North Africa today.
Right, a vast population.
And looking at the bigger implications, those ancient hostilities, the alliances, the cycles of conflict and cooperation we talked about, the source suggests they still kind of reverberate in the geopolitics of the region.
Without taking sides, you can see echoes, maybe?
Exactly. You can see how this historical identity, this lineage, might subtly underpin certain perspectives or relationships today. But crucially, while the story began with conflict, the Bible itself hints it doesn't have to end there.
Back to the prophet's hope.
Yes, they foresaw a day when even Ishmael's tribes would come to worship. It signifies that the invitation, that possibility for reconciliation, it's still open.
That's a powerful thought, a deeper thread running through history. Okay, let's try to distill some key lessons from Ishmael's story for all of us listening.
Yeah, okay. First, I think there's a clear warning about human efforts trying to force God's plans.
Abraham and Sarah with Hagar.
Exactly. Their decision brought strife that echoed for generations. It's a caution against trying to make things happen our way, through our own maneuvering, instead of trusting a bigger process, a divine timing. You know, like Proverbs says, trust in the Lord, lean not on your own understanding.
Right, submit to him.
Yeah. That trust aspect is huge. Second, you see the enduring power, or at least the possibility, of peace and forgiveness.
Even after centuries of conflict.
Well, history definitely holds deep wounds, and this story shows that clearly. But it also points towards reconciliation. It suggests that despite all that ancient conflict, the path towards peace, it still remains open. Like Romans reminds us, if it is possible, live at peace with everyone.
It's as far as it depends on you.
As far as it depends on you. And thirdly, I think Ishmael's story is just this profound testament to God's faithfulness. How promises hold even for those who seem pushed aside, marginalized, cast out.
Like Hagar and Ishmael in the desert.
Precisely. God's promises didn't fail. Not for Isaac, and not ultimately for Ishmael either. Their story shows how even people initially sidelined were still part of this larger, enduring plan. It echoes what Isaiah said about being a light for the Gentiles, salvation reaching to the ends of the earth. God sees the outsider.
That leads to this really compelling idea the source touches on, moving from division towards maybe a shared destiny.
Yeah.
It suggests that despite all the ancient rivalries, there's this ultimate vision of reconciliation. The Bible gives these glimpses, right? A future where Ishmael's descendants bring their gifts, their worship.
Right. And the source sort of rounds this off by pointing to Paul, again, in Galatians. If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise.
Yeah.
Meaning, in that view, the old lines blur. No Jew or Gentile, no Isaac or Ishmael in that ultimate sense. Only children of God, redeemed by grace. The invitation is open to everyone. It transcends those ancient divisions.
So, okay, let's sum up this deep dive then. Ishmael's story, it's this incredibly rich tapestry, isn't it? Blessing and conflict, family ties, ancient rivalries, promises given, paths chosen.
Absolutely. And it's a story that still, in profound ways, shapes the lands and peoples of the Middle East. It reveals deep historical roots for things we see today. Ishmael's journey really reflects that tension between, human impulse, the flesh maybe, and the divine promise, between striving and surrender, between division and reconciliation. His descendants, who started as outcasts, wanderers, they are definitely not forgotten.
No.
Their story is alive. In Scripture, yes, but also in the world around us. It's a powerful reminder, I think, that God's blessings are real, his judgments are just, and maybe his love is, unrelenting.
And maybe, as we finish up, something to think about is just how deeply these ancient stories promise conflict, reconciliation, how they continue to shape not just historical identities, but maybe our own understanding of human destiny. Ishmael's enduring legacy kind of invites us all to reflect, doesn't it, on how divisions get started and maybe, just maybe, how they might one day be overcome. A reminder that even the oldest stories still have powerful things to teach us.